So the Astros first pitched earlier than usual today. So I'm going to go ahead and do the Astros 100 a little bit early. So today we're doing Astros 14. Sometimes a franchise announces its future a little quietly. Uh, no parades, no national TV, no giant countdown, just some random Sunday in September. Um, this particular Sunday, the second game of a doubleheader in the cold air at Candlestick Park, the first place San Francisco Giants with Willie Mays in the lineup and a 21-year-old rookie playing for the Astros, built like a church steeple. By the time the afternoon was over, the Astros hadn't just won the baseball game. They watched the arrival of J.R. Richard. He didn't ease into the major leagues. He didn't nibble or politely introduce himself. He struck out 15 San Francisco Giants in his major league debut against Willie Mays, a contender, against a lineup that had every right to think this was just another game on the schedule. It wasn't. Welcome back to the Astros 100. I'm documenting one game per player until I reach 100. This is Astro 1-4, J.R. Richard, September 5th, 1971. Astros 5, Giants 3. Today's idea, simple. Sometimes the future does not knock. Sometimes it kicks the door in. This one's perfect for my project because it lives on two levels at once. If you already know who J.R. Richard became, this is the origin story. This is the first crack of thunder. This is the first public evidence that some of the stories are true. If you don't know who he became, the game still works because occasionally baseball gives you that old trick where a legend and unknown share the same field. And for one day, the unknown steals the movie. And that's what this is. The Giants walk into this game as the adults in the room. They're in first place. They have Willie Mays. They have pennant pressure, and they're home. They're supposed to be a serious baseball team. And the Astros walk in as a nuisance. They're not irrelevant, but they're not central either. They're not one of the clubs anybody's circling when they're talking about October. Then Houston hands the ball to their giant rookie right-hander from Louisiana. The whole shape of the day changes. That's the episode. Not just that J.R. Richards struck out 15 batters. It's who he did it against. It's what he did then. It's how the little warning there was. In retrospect, it's how clearly you can see a franchise staring into its own future. So let's set the world before the first pitch. The 1971 Giants are real. This is not some sleepy, drifting club. They're going to win the National League West. They're going to finish 90-72 and take the division. For a while, they're carrying a pretty hefty lead. The Dodgers are still there in the distance because the Dodgers are always there in the distance. But San Francisco on this day is the club with the weight and the authority. And that matters because if J.R. Richard did this against a bad team in August, with half the roster just playing out the string, it'd still be notable. But it wouldn't feel like this. The Astros, meanwhile, are living in the uncomfortable middle place. Respectable enough to annoy people. They can pitch, and they're not easy, but they're not the center of the pennant story either. They're going to finish 79-83. Exactly the kind of record that makes a team feel sturdier than it looks and less important than it actually is. That's Houston for a lot of those early years. They weren't harmless, but they weren't glamorous either. They were always capable of making your afternoon unpleasant. This particular afternoon, it's already a little crooked before Richard even takes the mound. This is game 2 of a doubleheader, and that matters because in the opener, the Astros win 1-0. And in that first game, Willie McCovey splits his left hand, trying to field a vicious bouncer. Dave Kingman is out with appendicitis. So now the Giants have to start improvising. Willie Mays, now 40 years old, has to move over and play first base. That gives the whole day an off-balance quality. The Giants, they're still the Giants. They're still dangerous and proud, and they're still in first place. They're also tilted. The furniture has been moved around, and the lights are dim. Just a few days earlier, on September 1st, the Pirates put the first all-black and Afro-Latino lineup on the field in Major League history. So baseball is sitting in one of those moments where old walls are still visible and new futures are opening. Games opening in front of anybody and everybody. That's useful information in the background for Richard because he's not just another rookie. He's a young black flamethrower from Louisiana, arriving in a major league that is still sorting out what it is, what it rewards, and whose greatness gets read correctly in real time. Before we get to Richard, I want to spend a minute on the baseball adults in the room. Harry Walker's managing Houston. Harry the Hat. He's a former batting champion, lifelong baseball fan, lifelong baseball man, a teacher, instructor. He's very smart. He's sharp. He's not universally beloved. He's one of those men who could teach hitting and irritate you at the same time. He had authority and edge. And with this Astros club, there was always a little friction in the walls. Joe Morgan, especially, didn't float through 1971 in perfect harmony with Harry Walker. The tension is part of this season's atmosphere. Houston could feel talented and tense at the same time. Across the way, Charlie Fox has the Giants. Fox, he's a Giants lifer, a player, coach, scout, organizational man. He's the kind of baseball figure who feels like he grew out of the franchise itself. In a lot of ways, 1971 becomes the year of the Fox. This is his division-winning club, not flashy in any managerial mythology, but they're sturdy and real. Then we have the starting pitchers. For San Francisco, Jim Willoughby, also making his major league debut. That's one of my favorite hidden details in this game. Both starters were debuting today. Same day, same game, same stage. One of them is about to become a historical footnote for the other one. I don't mean to be cruel. It's just true. Willoughby is the control sample. He's the normal debut. He's the version of this story that usually happens. Some nerves, some good moments, some trouble, and a quick hook. Life goes on. Then there's J.R. Richard, who arrives looking like somebody drew a picture without bothering to check if the dimensions were legal. 6'8", long arms, huge frame, massive fastball. Young enough that he still feels half finished. Raw enough that everyone knows command is the issue and gives it enough that nobody can stop talking about him. That's the contrast. One rookie starter is making his debut, the other's making an entrance. And let's talk plainly about the lineup in front of him. Willie Mays is here. That alone is enough to make this game matter. Even in 1971, this is not yet ceremonial Willie Mays. Not just a famous old name limping through retirement. Yes, Mays is 40, but he's still excellent. He's still an on-base monster, and he's still central to this first-place ball club. He still carries an impossible combination of charisma, threat, and authority. That matters because Richard is not striking out a ghost of greatness. He's striking out greatness that's still active, still dangerous, and still playing meaningful baseball. Bobby Bonds is there too. Bonds, even before we knew about Barry, Bobby was a terrifying athlete. Young power, chaos. The father of another earthquake yet to come. The broader Giants world still hums with names. Mays, McCovey, Marichal, Gaylord Perry. Even when every one of those men is not centered in this exact box score, the team still carries the glow. So when Richard takes the mound, it's not just that he's facing hitters. He's facing baseball memory. And that's why a casual fan should care, because this isn't obscure in the bad way. This is obscure in a beautiful way. It's one of the greatest debut performances ever, and it happened in near secrecy. And it happens against people that you've heard of. Now, let's do Richard properly. He was born March 7th, 1950, in Vienna, Louisiana. Raised in northern Louisiana in Lincoln High School in Ruston. World of football, basketball, track, and baseball talent. He was the kind of local legend that always sounds a little exaggerated until you realize even the exaggerations are probably underselling it. He had the size first. That's what hits you immediately. He wasn't just tall. He was in a way that changes geometry. tall in a way that makes baseball look like it's being thrown from the upstairs window of a house. But it wasn't empty size. The arm's real. His athleticism was real. The projection, ridiculous. The Astros took him second overall in 1969. Second overall. That tells you alone what they thought they were looking at. In the minors, the legend only grew. Not because he was polished. He wasn't. And not because he was easy. He wasn't. But because hitters knew they were dealing with something different. In 1971, in AAA OKC, he's striking out everybody. The stuff is so obvious that the command almost becomes part of the mythology. Can he harness it? Can he repeat it? Can he throw enough strikes? Can a body that large with the arm that explosive ever become efficiently dominant? Or will it always be a wrestling match between his control and his power? And that's the question following him all the way to San Francisco. If you know J.R. Richards' later story, the answer eventually becomes yes. Absolutely. Yes, with terrifying emphasis. But on this day, it's still theoretical. That's what makes his debut so electric. He's not arriving as a finished ace. He's arriving as a rumor. And then, within three innings, the rumor starts to become evidence. For Richard himself, the game's enormous. Not because one game can complete a player. It can't. And not because a game can erase the work still ahead. Can't do that either. But because this game tells him the dream version's possible. The fantasy version of J.R. Richard, the one scouts talked about, the ones they talked themselves into, the one hitters worried about, and the one the Astros hoped they were drafting, he could survive contact with major league reality. Against Mays, against a contender, against pressure, against the pennant race backdrop, a stadium and atmosphere that don't care about your hype. And afterward, Richard remembers one thing about everything else, striking out Willie Mays. Of course, that's what he's going to remember. If you're 21 and you just reached the majors and one of your first acts is striking Willie Mays out, you're going to remember that for the rest of your life. And so are we. Now the game. The beautiful part is that it doesn't begin as a clean domination. It begins messy. In the top of the first, Houston doesn't do anything. Little traffic, little noise, but no breakthrough. So Richard comes out for the bottom of the first with no cushion. Ken Henderson singles, and that wasn't ideal. Tito Fuentes grounded out, fine. Willie Mays stepped in, and Richard struck him out. That's the first big jolt in the story. Not the final one, and not the loudest, but the first. There it is on the board, proof of life. But the inning doesn't become myth right away, because Bobby Bonds reaches. Al Gallagher doubles and runs score, and the Giants jump ahead 2-0. So if you're watching live or listening live or sitting in the ballpark that afternoon, your first instinct isn't, oh my God, it's history being made. Your first instinct is, well, this kid's got huge stuff, but he might be wild today. That's important because the story needs resistance. The story needs to wobble before it settles. Bottom of the first, Richard struck out Willie Mays and still trails by 2 runs. That's a good baseball beginning. Second inning, Houston goes quietly. Dennis Menke out, John Mayberry strikes out, Larry Howard strikes out looking. Bottom of the second, Richard starts to find more shape. Ground ball, walk, strikeout, fly ball, no runs. Nothing too romantic, just the old process of a big young arm trying to turn raw force into actual command. And the top of the third is where the day changes. Ray Bussey strikes out, and Richard himself makes an out. 2 down. At that point, nothing looks inevitable. Nothing looks cinematic. It still looks like the Astros may waste the inning. Then Jesus Alou triples. Now there's blood in the water. Joe Morgan gets aboard. And Morgan, by the way, belongs in this story more than people remember. Every time you revisit these Astro teams from the early years, there he is, the little engine under the hood. The player who makes the whole club faster and smarter. Cesar Geronimo singles and a run scores. Morgan goes to third. Then Cesar Cedeno singles to center and another run scores. Now it's 2-2. And already you can feel something changing. Not just the scoreboard, the atmosphere. Because once Houston ties the game, Richard no longer looks like the nervous kid trying not to ruin the day. Now he looks like a weapon whose team just gave him permission. Then when you go to the bottom of the third, which is where the performance becomes unforgettable, Fuentes strikes out, Mays strikes out looking, and then Bond strikes out swinging. That's the inning. That's one of those innings that changes the chemistry of the whole game. 3 hitters, 3 strikeouts. Not empty strikeouts either. This is Fuentes, Mays, and Bonds. That's one of the best single innings an Astros pitcher could possibly invent for this kind of story. Because now the crowd, the Giants dugout, the Astros dugout, everybody has the same question. Who is this? Top of the fourth, John Mayberry reaches. There's movement. There's pressure. Larry Howard singles to center, and Mayberry scores. Astros lead 3-2. Now the story shifts from surprise to authority. Bottom of the fourth, Richard works through some traffic and leaves the Giants empty again. Top 5, Houston adds to separation. Morgan walks, and being Morgan, he starts causing trouble right away. He steals second base. Morgan makes the defense think and stretches the geometry of every inning he gets on base. Then Geronimo doubles. Morgan scores. A little later, Cedeno drives in Geronimo, and now it's 5-2. This is where I want to stop for a second and praise the supporting cast, because these episodes can get too focused on the headliner sometimes. Richard is the star of this game, no question. But this is how a good example of how baseball fame depends on accomplices. Morgan helps create the inning. Geronimo cashes it. Cedeno cashes it. And Howard's already driven in a run. The Astros aren't just standing there watching Richard become a myth. They're building him a scoreboard. Once it's 5-2, the game starts feeling less like a tight contest and more like a test. Can the rookie sustain this? Because when we say Richard struck out 15 in his debut, we should not just hear the number. We should hear the conditions. This is a doubleheader. This is Candlestick Park. This is not soft landing weather. This is not a tidy, controlled rookie showcase. This is a rough old baseball setting with wind, fatigue, defensive improvisation, and a first-place team trying not to get embarrassed in front of the home crowd. 9 innings, no manager rescue, no modern pitch limit, no third-inning meeting with 3 analysts holding iPads and concern. He just goes the whole way, which is why the performance matters. It feels older, harder, and more dangerous than a lot of modern rookie debuts. Because it is. We'll never see this type of thing again. From there, the game enters my favorite phase, the long middle phase, where the history of possibility slowly hardens into certainty. Top 6, Houston does nothing. Fine, doesn't matter. Bottom 6, Richard keeps missing bats. Top 7, Houston still can't tack anything on. But Joe Morgan steals another base because, of course, Joe Morgan steals another base. He keeps turning ordinary innings into slightly more difficult math problems for the opponent. In the bottom of the 7th, Richard keeps rolling. By now, the strikeout total's climbing, and the Giants are experiencing that specific hitter's discomfort where the at-bat starts to feel shorter than it should. Dietz, Henderson, Lanier. Everybody sharing the same bad afternoon. And this is where the no TV angle matters. Excuse me. There's no national television audience for this masterpiece. There's no giant visual archive, no instantly viral mythology, no clip package pushed into every home by midnight. Mostly, it lived in the box score, the wire reports, the local memory, and the testimony of the people who were actually there. Honestly, that's kind of perfect because baseball history loves to hide in plain sight. It likes to make you look for it later. Look, we found it. On to the 8th, because the game doesn't go away. It gives us one more shiver. Willie Mays draws a walk, and that matters because Mays, still smart enough to bother you, even when he's not hitting the rocket. Bobby Bonds makes an out. Al Gallagher strikes out, and then Chris Spear reaches on an error by Dennis Menke. Mays scores, and that trims it to 5-3. I like this inning for the episode because it rescues the ending from becoming too clean. It reminds you there's still a game happening, not just a coronation. Jim Ray Hart pinch hits and reaches safely. There's momentary clutter, momentary tension, A little bit of old baseball panic. Then Fran Healy strikes out looking, and Richard gets out of it. That strikeout's important emotionally because it tells you he's not just piling up Ks during the early portions of the afternoon. He can also close the door when the inning starts to twitch. In the top of the ninth, Houston goes quietly, so there's no decorative insurance, no extra padding, no elegant final flourish with the bats. The game is handed back to Richard, exactly the way a great pitching story wants it. Protect 2 runs, finish what you started. Do it yourself. Bottom of the ninth, Dick Dietz strikes out. That's number 13. Ken Henderson strikes out. That's number 14. Hal Lanier strikes out. That is number 15. Game over. Astros win 5-3. And J.R. Richard, in his major league debut, has tied the debut record with 15 strikeouts. And that's the moment. Not complicated, not dressed up. Just 3 more Giants walking back to the dugout and a Giant rookie standing on the mound as if this was a completely reasonable way to introduce yourself to baseball. So what did this game mean in the moment? For Houston, it was a revelation, not salvation, not an instant transformation, not sudden contender status, but it was a revelation. It meant the Astros had something real. Prospects can be rumors for a long time. You hear about velocity, about frame, you hear about strikeout rates in the minors, you hear about ceiling, and ceiling is one of the most dangerous words in sports because it lets everybody imagine whatever they want to. But this game gave Houston something much better than a ceiling. The Giants, meanwhile, experienced it as something more annoying than apocalyptic. A sweep in the doubleheader? Yes. An ugly day? Sure. A warning sign? Oh, yeah. But if the Giants are going to win the division, they're still the adults in the room, at least in the standings. And that's what makes the game feel right, historically. Because for one team, it's the beginning of a legend. For the other, it's an unpleasant Sunday, when they probably didn't realize it'd be discussed another 50-plus years later. And the post-game texture is great, too. Richard's pretty cool about it, almost suspiciously so. He wasn't puffed up or theatrical. He basically talks like a man who believes the main job was simply throwing strikes. And there's something perfect about that, because if he'd gone into the room talking like he had altered baseball history, it would feel false. He was just 21. He still had too much ahead of him. And besides, some great athletes really do experience their own brilliance at first as something almost procedural. I threw, they missed. What's everybody yelling about? Mays, to his credit, does not cheapen it. He recognizes the quality and the simple problem. If a man throws that hard and gets enough of the ballpark, then you have an issue. That's one of the nice things about old stars. They have enough ego to remain legends and enough honesty to know when something authentic just hit them in the face. If you're not an Astros fan, why would you care about this game? I'll tell you, because this is one of those games that explains what baseball's good at. Baseball's good at the collision between known greatness and unknown greatness. It's good at preserving weird old afternoons that didn't come with branding, hype, and immediate prestige, and allowing a random date on a calendar to turn into a myth just because the field says it has to. And it's good at scale. A baseball game can hold everything: pennant tension, aging legends, young monsters, doubleheader fatigue, lineup improvisation, regional obscurity, and one brilliant, violent arm, changing the way people think about the future. That's this game. You don't need to be an Astros partisan to appreciate that. But you need to like the moment when the room feels like it's been misjudging who the main character is. All right, let's pull back. The Giants do finish the job. They win the NL West, 90 wins, division title. But it gets tighter than that. The Dodgers keep coming. That comfortable lead shrinks. San Francisco has to work all the way to the end to lock the thing down. Then in the NLCS, they beat Pittsburgh in game 1, then lose 3 straight. So even for the Giants, 1971 becomes a season with a little brittleness to it. A good team, a real team, and a division winner, but they weren't immortal. The Astros finished 79 and 83. No miracle run, no dramatic late charge into relevance. Just a 4th-place tie and the familiar sensation of being a little tougher than the record looked, which again is why this game matters so much. It's not a pivot point for the season. It is a pivot point for your imagination. Houston doesn't become a great team that day, but they get to believe with a real reason that a great pitcher might be taking shape. And of course, the larger J.R. Richards story is why this episode carries so much weight, because the debute's not a trick, it's a trailer. The finished version takes a little time, but eventually he becomes exactly what this game hinted at: one of the most frightening pitchers in baseball. He wins 20 games in 1976, leads the league in strikeouts in 1978, and again in 79. He piles up complete games, innings, fear, and reputation. By 1980, he's not just good. He's one of the defining power pitchers in the sport, an all-star ace, and a man who looks built to dominate the decade. And then, July 30th, 1980, comes the stroke, a career-ending stroke, one of the great ruptures in Houston baseball history. Now, because the game has never seen an injury before, it has. Not because all careers end fairly, they don't, but because Richard looked like one of those real pitchers whose story still had major chapters left in it. What follows wasn't neat. It wasn't inspiring in the shallow sports moving way. There was hardship, collapse, confusion, pain, homelessness, years of dislocation, and that matters too. Because when we celebrate the debut, we shouldn't turn him into a myth so polished that the human being disappears inside it. The real J.R. Richards story is both magnificent and tragic. It has force, glory, waste, survival, eventually a kind of grace. He rebuilt pieces of his life. He became a speaker, a pastor, a man able to tell the story himself. The Astros, to their credit, did honor him in their Hall of Fame. So when we watch this debut, we're not just looking at a first chapter. We're looking at the first chapter of a life that will not move in a straight line. So what's this game really? It's not only a record-tying debut. It's not only 15 strikeouts. It's not only Willie Mays going down 3 different times. It's a franchise seeing, for the first time in public, the full outline of a future ace. That's what you remember. The scale of him, the audacity, the obscurity, the absurdity that there was so little national witness, the feeling that baseball had casually slipped one of its great openings into the second game of some random Sunday doubleheader. That's pretty baseball. It doesn't always put the masterpiece where casual people can find it easily. Sometimes it hides it under a date and a box score and waits for the right weirdo to come looking later. Fortunately for us, I'm that weirdo. So next time we stay with one of the young bats who helped make this afternoon possible. Cesar Cedeno, August 2nd, 1972, and that's fitting because Cedeno's all over this game. 2 RBI, real pressure in the middle of the order, and the sense even here that Houston's not just assembling a pitching future, they're assembling the next generation. That was Astros 14, J.R. Richard, September 5th, 1971. Astros 5, Giants 3. A first-place team, Hall of Famer. A doubleheader and a weird Sunday. A giant rookie and 15 strikeouts. Sometimes the future doesn't arrive politely. Sometimes it announces itself with a fastball and a pile of empty swings. On that afternoon at Candlestick, the Astros got their announcement. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.